Now into the third and final hour, your calls are coming up on a host of issues. And about 35, 40 after, we're going to have Dr. Doug Rocky go then. We appreciate him spending time with us today. He's had more than 40 surgeries just to stay alive. And much of his team has died from cleaning up depleted uranium on the highway of death in Iraq. He wrote the Army's DU handbook. And I don't have time to go over his 5-page bio, but Dr. Doug Rocky is a depleted uranium expert. He earned his BS in physics following his MS and PhD in physics and technology education. His military career has spanned now up to 5 decades, to include combat duty during Vietnam War and Gulf War I. Doug served as a member of the 3rd U.S. Army Medical Command Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical NBC Teaching, Medical Response, and Special Operations Team, 3rd U.S. Army Captured Equipment Project Team, and the 3rd U.S. Army Depleted Uranium Assessment Team during Gulf War Operation Desert Storm. He was the U.S. Army Depleted Uranium Project Director of the entire program in 94-95. He developed the congressionally mandated education and training materials, wrote the U.S. Army Regulation 700-48, U.S. Army PAM 748, U.S. Army Command Task for DU Incidents, or Common Task. Doug has taught nuclear, biological, chemical warfare, hazardous materials, and emergency medicine for 20 years to police all over the country and civilians. He has been an advisor, on-screen expert for numerous television documentaries. I just can't even cover it all. Dr. Doug has taught undergraduate and graduate courses in environmental science, environmental engineering, nuclear physics, emergency management, and was a staff physicist at the University of Illinois. And I just can't even go over it before he retired. He serves as the advisor of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. National Academy of Sciences, U.S. Institute of Medicines, U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives, U.S. Department of Transportation, U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, U.S. Department of U.S. Defense, General Accounting Office, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, British Royal Society, British House of Lords of Commons, United Nations, U.S. President Clinton Presidential Oversight Board. I mean, I can't even do the whole deal. The point is, he is the expert, Dr. DU. And, you know, we'll go to 40 after with him. I know he'd say do the whole hour, but I don't want to sit here and exhaust him because I know he's been in rehab and stuff. That's why he hadn't been able to come on. It took me a month to get him on. I wanted to get him on because when I had a month ago, the sailors from the USS Ronald Reagan who were out there right off the coast of Fukushima doing disaster relief and who got sick within days and then now are in wheelchairs, blood coming out their orifices, teeth falling out, kidney failure, all the regular radiation sickness stuff, standard procedure stuff. I thought about Doug Rocky because they didn't even tell them they needed potassium iodate when they were on the ship. Only those that went on shore at the site were given that. Even though they admitted they went through the plume and knew it and radiation detectors were going off. When our reporters were out in California, the San Francisco paper reported, yes, there's 14 times and 10 times and 5 times the regular millisievert level, but we're not going to investigate. It's no big deal. Well, 20 years ago, it would be a big deal. So there's this attitude now, since about 1990, that DU, it doesn't matter. It's not a problem anymore. And you're seeing almost everybody that worked on TEPCO dying now. And then you saw Dr. Doug Rocky and his team and the hell they went through. And then not taking care of the troops once they get sick. That was the sailors we had on. Can't even get medical care when they go into the VA. And they've got catheters in them, 3 years after Fukushima. And it's everything that Dr. Doug broke down. So he is the man to talk about his experience in the Gulf War, what happened. And now, when I used to get Dr. Doug Rocky on 16 years ago, I've been talking to him since about 1998, so I guess 16 years. Since all that's happened, they've gone from letting them sit on the ammo of 50 cal DU and the Sabos and the Abrams, the larger main gun stuff, which radiate your testicles all day long, to letting them shoot it, not even cleaning it properly, into small arms at shooting ranges, into forklift weights. This is a proliferation. They may put it on the back of Wheaties next, saying it's good for you. Doctor, what are we facing here as the expert?
It's just a medical and environmental catastrophe. It's never ended. I mean, when we go back and all the stuff that I learned as the director of the Depleted Uranium Project and having getting tasked by name to clean up the mess during Desert Storm, well, I got to remember we had a direct order to disregard the health and environmental effects, alter all our reports to avoid all liability. mean, the United States is deliberately and willfully, the U.S. military leadership has contaminated air, water, and soil all over the world with uranium emissions. We went in saying, well, we're going into these countries to give them freedom, and all we did is bomb them into oblivion. And what they've done to the U.S. military, all of us that they sent into this stuff, is just catastrophic. I mean, during Operation Desert Storm, which supposedly was 100 hours, was a lot longer than that, really. But we had less than 1,000 actual casualties. That's wounded in action, killed in action, and everything during the war. But now you've got probably 60% of those who participated in Desert Storm trying to get medical care because all the complex toxic exposures, and DU is just one of them. And then we had Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, which the invasion plans, as you know, we wrote during the 1990s, had nothing to do with 911, zero, nada, nothing. And now we're looking at 1.5 million casualties out of that. And the backlog in the Veterans Benefit Administration awarding medical care is so broken, it's staggering. And when anybody puts the information in, it disappears. I'll give you an example. In my own medical record from the Danville VA, they submitted over 200 pages to Chicago Regional Office. The letter from Chicago Regional Office says, you don't have any problems, we only got 6 pages. And I hear that day in and day. I mean, there's not a single day where I don't have somebody or a spouse or a kid or a father or somebody contact me and say, help, what do we do? How do we get medical care? Going all the way back to the nuclear testing.
Well, as you told me 16, 17 years ago on air, they go in with their kidneys failing and they go, here's some Prozac or the new drugs. And then I have these Navy vets on who are having to sue. They won't even give them medical attention because they don't want to admit they've got radiation poisoning.
Well, they can't admit they have any of these toxic exposures. Just for example, right here in Rantoul, Illinois, Chanute Air Force Base, total confirmation the trichloroethane contamination in the Wisconsin aquifer, and you've got the documents, you can verify it, exceeds what they know at Camp Lejeune, and everybody in the military and the VA and DOD is freaking out about Camp Lejeune and the health effects, but they're disregarding all of these other installations, all these bases are contaminated, because to admit one, they have to admit all, and once they have to admit all, they have to provide medical care to everybody going way back before.
That's right, and by the way, every time you come on, you always send us a bunch of documents, so while you're talking about this, for radio listeners, he's putting it on screen, and by tomorrow we'll have that video archived from the live feed that's going out now. It'll be on Infowars.com for everybody. Like the Pentagon's own reports that you cite, where they admit DU's killing the troops, but then they still deny it on the news. It's just dastardly.
Yeah, they don't care. I mean, you have to understand, in March of 1991, the Los Alamos Memorandum was issued, and I was handed that by the generals. And it was a direct order to lie in our reports to avoid liability, knowing full well all of the serious health and environmental effects. You can't take radiological materials, chemical and biological materials, distributed all over the world, all over an area, release it, and not expect the health effects which have been known from day one, and then just say, well, there's no problem. You're all making it up in your imagination. And then what they do, and this is what's horrible, absolutely horrible, is they give them psychotropic drugs and all this other stuff that have no effect there other than dumbing them down and then make them feel good for a few minutes, but it doesn't solve the problem. I mean, it doesn't solve the problem. All it does is mask it. And then next thing we know is we got suicide upon suicide, and kids giving up, and families giving up, and families in crisis, and child and spouse abuse. Oh, my.